my own work. But it is a highly collaborative piece of research where 4 faculty colleagues within the Center of Urban Policy and Governance at School of Habitat Studies, Himanshu, Lalita and Rakula, are integral to this project, as are our research officers. I will not name them all, but all of them are here. And it has also taken shape with a lot of people in the field with whom we have started thinking about this project. What I'm going to really focus on just now, and the entire way of thinking about violence here, is in continuation with what we started yesterday in the plenary. That violence is not just about direct interpersonal kind of violence, but violence in a lot of ways in our contemporary times is embedded within the changing relationship of the state and market to society, where state and market have become much more closely poised together. It may be seen as neoliberalism, it may be seen as a nexus. There are some people who call it crony capitalism. There are others which have tried to add more nuance to it and talked about actually existing neoliberalism. So there are various ways in which one can frame this state market access. But this state market access and the way it is produced in Mumbai takes a very specific turn, and we are trying to examine that state market access, how it had changed, the kind of different injustices that it has produced, which is really going to be very short because we will focus on that in another city panel. But what I'm going to focus on now in this presentation is really to look at how and what kind of trajectories of violence does this changing state market access actually produce, and how do we comprehend, how do we frame, how do we understand this violence and its outcomes for the marginalized communities. I think we need to understand a little bit about the Indian context before we move into this. And particular to Mumbai, one needs to acknowledge that relative to several cities in the world and relative to several cities in India, Mumbai is considered to be a city which is a safe city. Okay? A safe city with some of the lowest parameters in terms of violence in public spaces, though it has been increasing in relation to the city's history, yet in comparison to other cities of the world and other cities in India, it remains quite low. There is an overwhelming, therefore, as I said, perception of safety. On the other hand, there is a highly violent history and trajectory of violence within family, within communities. And therefore, violence constantly is used to maintain the existing social distance, status quo, and remains quite hidden from public gaze. So that is the overall backdrop within which one needs to perhaps understand violence in Mumbai itself. If we understand also Mumbai really as a city, then the historical features of Mumbai, it has been a highly iniquitous city, a colonial creation, not something which has had an organic existence right from the beginning. And it is really the state market access which has an alliance actually within the colonial period as opposed to just the colonialist acting. There are a lot of observations about and a reading, or rather a rereading of Mumbai's history points out how the development of Mumbai has not been shaped just by the colonizers, but actually by an alliance of the colonizers with indigenous elite. And it is this kind of alliance which, however, required labor, because very quickly Mumbai shifted from a trading city to a manufacturing city, which required labor, which required bodies. And therefore, the way in which this history of this city is developed is that while it maintained several layers of inequities, like the colonized and the colonizer in terms of space, the elite and the poor, And all of this has been reflected in the kind of spatial justice that the city has. At the same time, you also have a very tightly compressed city where the rich and the poor and the elite and the colonizers, everybody lives in a very tight social fabric, though a lot of the poor are denied citizenship. If one looks at the contemporary state market access, we see several features. One, that the industry is moving out of the city in a very, very significant manner. As a result, labor has been disenfranchised. Currently, it is estimated that more than 70–75% of the labor force in Mumbai works in the unorganized or an informal kind of sector. Real estate has become a highly dominating force which really shapes the city in multiple ways. And given the fact that this city had a very tight spatial fabric, one of the forces that one will encounter, perhaps many of you who have been to field visits yesterday, have encountered how redevelopment has really become that magic force, magic term, which shapes a lot of what is currently happening in the city. So this is something that we really need to understand. The third dimension of this state market access is really the overall communalization of governance. I'm using this term in a very deliberative manner. By communalization of governance, what I mean is where the state begins to deploy identities and use these within its overall framework of governmentality and who gets what in the city and how. So I think it is these three characteristics which really shape the contemporary state market access. What this has meant, the outcomes of this state market, current alliance of state market, mean that there is a shrinking of tolerance and inclusionary spaces, that the spatial divisions have solidified, that there is a socio-spatial transformation of the city, and spatial justice is really getting a very, very new kind of meaning, a very complex meaning. At the same time, we are aware that this alliance of the state and market is not a straightforward alliance, but a complex, situated, contradictory alliance, and which is negotiated between the formal and the informal realms. So basically, we are also trying to understand different kinds of capital, which is also interwoven in all of this. We are aware that it produces several sub-regimes, which Jaideep here has talked about as infra-power, and I think it's a very, very interesting context. Sometimes these sub-regimes are much more powerful than the text which the state produces. So it is within the context of all of these that I really begin to look at 4 case studies that we have undertaken within Mumbai and the kind of trajectories of violence that we see. These are the 4 case studies. This basically just illustrates that what we have tried to look at in locating these case studies is how Mumbai itself has been also changing. So there is one case study of case 4, Kamatipura, which is located in the inner city of Mumbai within the island city. We'll look at that. The second is, case number 2, is Jogeshwari-Vikhroli Link Road, which is about an infrastructure project, a road project, and the kind of violence that involves. The third case, M Ward, is in terms of an entire ward on the eastern front, shown here, and a ward is an administrative unit of the city, once considered to be a periphery, something which has become very much a part of the city in the 1960s, but used in almost a peripheral kind of way. And your case 1, which is shown here, which is that of Vasai-Virar, which even now in administrative term constitutes the periphery of the city, but is also emerging as one of the most populous metropolitan region, a town which is a corporation, in fact, which is located within the overall metro region of Mumbai. I'm not following this sequence, however, as I move further. Let me move to Jogeshwari-Vikhroli Link Road. Jogeshwari-Vikhroli Link Road is actually a road which was conceptualized in the 1960s, and then having conceptualized it in the 1960s, this was a plan which lay in abeyance, and then in the 1990s, this road connection was finally made. There was a huge argument made that the city requires east-west linkages. In a city which largely has north-south linkages, this road was considered very important. But this road that connects is also a road that disconnects. And the violence that we look at here in the JVLR case study, the Jogeshwari Vikhroli Ring Road, is actually about many of these disconnections. This photograph is one of the early photographs of the kind of struggles, the kind of life which existed in this informal settlement, the kind of troubles that people have taken working against a hostile state, and the violence which has been involved in that overall neglect of the state in understanding the requirements of the people who lived here. So most of this environment is actually made by communities over a period of 20 or 25 years or so. And then what you see is this, a road which disrupts that entire life. You look at this kind of a partialization and the kind of fragmentation of the community which has happened through this. And it's not just one project and one road extension, but what our case study finds is that what is contemplated and what is threatened is that there is a series of projects, okay, with the result that one of the residents of this area actually exclaims that how wide is this road going to be? Okay? Because there is a extension after extension, and with the result that people are kept in uncertainty constantly. The entire struggle around becoming eligible, the imposition of very foreign forms of organization by shifting them to resettlement colonies which are 7 stories high, very different system of financial burdens, and the overall turbulence of placemaking and coping with issues which aren't cognized by policy. I think this is the real trajectory of violence that one sees in Jogeshwari Vikhroli Ring Road. The M-Ward story. This is a picture of a slum which is located right where we are sitting, I mean almost in the neighborhood of this, in the BARC hospital, the road along which you came. This is where this settlement was located. It's called Janta Colony. It was settled here in the 1960s when the state, and in 1952, the then Chief Minister of the state of Maharashtra, Morarji Desai, shifted a whole lot of slums from the island city to this place called Janta Colony. And what you see here again is this struggle not just of placemaking, but of actually being displaced once. Okay? They stayed in the inner city, closer to their sources of livelihood which are in the island city, like docks, like industries, etc., textile mills. And they have been brought here to a part of the city which had none of these opportunities. They have constructed these houses in the 1970s and then only to be shifted all over again in the 1980s. Janta Colony was brutally demolished in the 1980s and shifted some 6 kilometers further up in a settlement called Cheetah Camp, which was one of our field study sites. What this photograph shows is the way the site was when people were shifted. What existed over there was just a few toilets. All those structures, the 3 structures that you see there are actually public toilets. That's all. And they were marked sites and they were asked to just live there. That's it. Okay? So this is the kind of a constant shifting, the constant settlement and unsettlement and resettlement in the way the state has actually seen this. So in the M-Ward case study, we are really trying to understand what and how the relationship of the slum to the city has actually been. And in Mumbai, it really assumes a very, very important kind of a thing. And one sees that this entire relationship of the slum to the city is important because it represents the up and down in an ongoing struggle of the precariat to actually assert its right to the city. It's a struggle which is characterized by violence in so many forms, that of the state in its imagination of the settlements and the actions that follow. The use of violence as an instrument in the context of larger structural violence. This is actually one of the more recent demolitions. So if Cheetah Camp demolition happened in the 1980s, these demolitions have not gone away. This picture that we are showing, first picture is that of another settlement here called Maharashtra Nagar, which undergoes roughly a eviction a year. Okay? That's the kind of proportion. The second picture that you have is really of a settlement called Mandala, which put up a very, very brave fight and a resistance to its demolition in 2004. And this is the kind of police force which was actually deployed to evict that slum. So while this kind of a direct and an overt use of violence by the state seems to have actually reduced, and it has become much more episodic, what one also sees is that this direct violence has now been replaced by more indirect, more overt forms of violence, which are nonetheless producing as much distress. This is actually the photograph of a toilet in a settlement called Maharashtra Nagar, again located in this ward. This is a toilet which was created through a World Bank scheme, funds which were given to an NGO in the city, which constructed and maintained this toilet. A woman went in the early mornings to this toilet. The toilet floor collapsed and the woman died. This kind of violence that one is talking of, which is a violence which is linked to everyday needs, everyday services, is something that one needs to perhaps recognize, cognize, name, and perhaps also challenge. Overall, therefore, if one looks at the M-ward, these kind of aspects of violence being produced in everyday life are reproduced in several kinds of things. This includes education, this includes health, and if you look at M-ward, it is an imposition of so many forms of undesirable uses in this ward. I'll move to the next case study, and which is that of the inner city, which is Kamatipura. Kamatipura again is a very, very interesting area, because what you see here in Kamatipura is that it is located, its overall development is linked to the heart of the island city of Mumbai, in the proximity of these mills, and what we see, the kind of violence happening here is linked to this dying of mills, to the entire pressure of redevelopment, conceptualized as an area which would house several of those activities which are considered illegal under courts, would serve as forms of recreation for laboring bodies. It was a red light area for the city. It was a haven of drugs for the city. This was the place where a lot of trade would happen. This was a place where several migrant workers would actually find refuge in the city. A lot of poor people housing which was here. And this really was like a safe haven for many of these activities. What has happened with the changing of the mills and the transformation of the mills and the jail, which is also in the proximity? So you can see that this is an area which is located right in the center of the city, in the proximity of several of the infrastructures of the city, and with this kind of a tight spatial fabric of 13 lanes, an extremely small area, but with a hugely dense population and multiple users, a lot of whom belong to the marginalized sections of society. So what has happened to this area is basically that most of the so all of these accommodations that one sees of minority communities, migrant workers, small manufacturing, homeless population, destitutes, today most of these livelihoods in Kamatipura have become very, very vulnerable. They are being named as illegal and even immoral. So therefore then, what happens to the overall sex work, which faces the threat of being wiped out from the city, whether it is in the names of the AIDS threat or other kinds of moral policing. The increasing informalization of work, there is a transformation of these spaces. What is very interesting is that the state has tried to come in at multiple points in time and redevelop this entire area altogether. That transformation hasn't worked, but instead there is a whole lot of transformation of these spaces which is really happening from below, where new shops are taking the place of the places where sex work used to happen. And the entire talk around redevelopment has really crystallized some of the socio-economic inequalities in the entire thing of Kamatipura. This is really an aging sex worker who is pointing out to the research team the kind of transformations which have happened in Kamatipura. Another illustration of the kind of transformations that we see here. This is a place which has always experienced very overt violence. But today what one sees is that the overall surveillance, the overall dependence on intermediaries, the entire thing of the denial of livelihoods is something which is very, very active and is producing a lot of violence here. We shift to Vasai Virar, and Vasai Virar is a region in which, in the overall development of Mumbai, where there has been only one planned extension to the city. So locating it within that, if one looks at Vasai Virar, this is the production of an urbanization through regimes that are informal. And this informality has actually been produced in many, many different ways. Two clear factors which are here emerging is how the railway lines and the use of the green zone and the urbanizable zone have actually been used to actually generate an overall fragmented kind of landscape, graduated sovereignty, where one particular family really consolidates its entire rule in multifarious ways. And again, the forms of violence that you see here are, there is overt violence, there is surveillance of the kind of settlements which are existing over here, a particular impact on the migrants who stay here, migrant workers, the dependence on intermediaries, the denial of citizenship and basic entitlements like voter cards. So, where are we? If we look at the overall trends in Mumbai, as I said, the overt violence of the state has definitely reduced and been confined to episodes. But what we see is that there is much more indirect everyday life violence, and everyday life of the marginalized has definitely become much more uncertain, much more violent. And the perpetrators of this violence also often belong to the marginalized sections. I think the kind of trajectory that we are seeing today is coming much more closer to the overall concept of symbolic violence, which was proposed by Bourdieu, and where there's a new kind of order which is being produced, which creates and which is linked to overall discourses of being illegal, being eligible, criminalization of the kind of work activity and life activity that you do, being migrants and outsiders, being Muslims. So there is a constant otherization process which is happening. And along with the state, the emergent role of the middle class is also something which is very, very significant in production of this order of symbolic violence. Is it enough to just characterize this violence as symbolic violence? Should we stop there? Direct violence can be countered perhaps in much more easier ways. It is easy to see who is the perpetrator of this violence. But symbolic violence that gets embedded within the very fabric of governance of society and within the sights of those who are impacted even by the negative impacts of this violence, it becomes a very difficult thing to actually counter. It also produces fear. It produces staying away, avoidance of risk. And I think that, therefore, one needs to look at resistance to this in many different ways. I think it's beyond just now the scope of this presentation to really look at what are the efforts to challenge this kind of violence. I think it is enough just now to cognize that the symbolic violence, the forms that it is taking, are being responded to. There are fairly vibrant efforts, but there are also, that itself is both emancipatory in its character, but it is also corrosive in its character. And therefore, it leaves us with a whole lot of dilemmas.